Hi, everybody. Baruch Fogel here. I wanted to speak to you today in honor of the upcoming Chag of Shavuos. I wanted to speak to you about an interesting event that took place in the Shavuos of 1773. In the Shavuos of 1773, a sermon was given in the synagogue in Newport, Rhode Island, in the shul that was called Yeshuat Yisrael, the Salvation of Israel, by a Rabbi, Chaim Isaac Carrigal of the city of Hebron near Jerusalem in the Holy Land. Now, this is a photo offset of the original, and it was the first sermon, first drasha printed in the colonies or in the New World, whatever word you'd like to use. And I'd like to speak about why it's important. Now, obviously, you'll tell me it's important because it's the first one printed, and that's true. So in the Judaic sense, it's a very rare, true, it's interesting. But who is this rabbi? Who are the people he was talking to? What did he say on that Shavuos, 1773, that we can take a lesson for us today here in America, in New York, in 2021? So let's begin. So here we have, this is the man's name is Rabbi Isaac or Chaim Isaac or Fall Chaim Isaac Carrigal. As you can see here, he's not Hasidic. This is the original picture. This is how it was made to look better, and this is how it actually became a portrait at Yale. He was wearing a tall fur hat and clothing of a Turkish and Ottoman Jew. He lived in Hebron. He was a shadar, shilucha derabanan. He was an emissary. He got a smicha about 20 years old, 1753. He was sent then by the community to go around the world, to Italy, to Amsterdam, to the countries of Europe, and to the Americas. When I say Americas, I don't really mean the colonies. I mean Jamaica, Curacao, Suriname, Barbados, which had very big Jewish populations, and to had two functions. Go be a shaliach, go raise some money, bring back some money, but also go teach Judaism. Go show them what authentic Judaism looks like from Hebron to the Jews of the world. And there were many such shadars, shlucha d'Rabbanan. Here's another one, which was Chaim Yosef David Azulai, the famous Chida. Here's the original picture of what he looked like, and here is the touched up or the photoshopped or version of him. So Rabbi Chaim Isaac Carrigal comes to Newport, Rhode Island on the day on Purim, 1773. He's there for a few months, and he gives this drasha, this sermon in the synagogue in 1773, May 28th, and it's printed. So first of all, why does he go to Newport? How did it get printed? And again, back to the content, why is it relevant? So he went to Newport because of this person. This person here, his name is Aaron Duarte Lopez. Aaron Lopez was born in Lisbon, Portugal, as a secret Jew, a Marrano. And if you think about it, that's unbelievable. Here we're talking about 1497, the Jews of Portugal were forcibly converted. That means the Lopez family for over 200 years was hiding out as a Jew. That's a long time. Aaron Lopez, and that's his wife, painted by Gilbert Stewart over here on the right. Aaron Lopez and his wife and his child, not that one, the older one, had decided at some point they're going to throw off the pretense of being a new Christian. They're going to sail to the New World, to Newport, Rhode Island, and they are going to accept Judaism. If it comes to America, my name is no longer Duarte, it's Aaron, and my name is no longer Isabel, it's Esther. And I think he even gives himself a bris. But more than that, he openly accepts, returns to Judaism. Now, he becomes a very important person. The wealthiest Jew in America, and when I say America, obviously I'm talking 1773, the wealthiest Jew in the colonies, one of the wealthiest men of the colonies. So it makes sense that the rabbi coming to collect funds for the Jews of Hebron would go to where the wealthiest Jew would live. Makes a lot of sense. But there's something else. And to that we have to explain something for a second. Why do we know about this? We know about this because of this man. This man, his name is Ezra Stiles. Ezra Stiles was a Protestant, a Congregationalist minister in Newport, eventually the president of Yale, and he loved Judaism. He loved knowing about how to read Hebrew. He loved how to read the Bible in Hebrew. He loved the Gemara. He loved Zohar, Kabbalah, which was very important to him. And that's why, by the way, Yale was very, very much a lover of Hebrew. That's why Urim V'Tumim is on its seal. But interestingly enough, and that's how what's relevant to us, is that he kept a diary of basically every day of his life. What he did. Some days were mundane and some days were unbelievably interesting from a historical point of view. So in volume 1, which is over here, You have January 1769 to March 1776, and obviously May 1773 falls out amongst those days. Here you have the description. And the description, again, this is from his diary. He's writing a diary, which is what was normal back in those days to do. Here's the diary from the 28th. May 28th, Pentecost, Shavuos. I went to the synagogue. The rabbi was there. He spoke in Spanish for 47 minutes. So I hope you allow your rabbi to speak for 47 minutes. The truth is, in other parts of the diary, it tells us that Rabbi Cargill went to the church or to the Protestant temple, whatever you call it, to hear him speak, and he spoke for over an hour and a quarter. So I guess 47 minutes was considered a short drasha back then. And it says here he spoke in Spanish, but it wasn't Spanish, it was Ladino. And Ezra Stiles says, being that I speak Spanish and Latin, he spoke a lot of languages, I sort of understood what he said. And then he gives a description of what this rabbi is wearing. He was wearing a fur cap, not because he was Hasidish, because really Hasidish didn't really begin yet in 1773, but because that's how a Turkish or a respectable Turkish Ottoman Jew or Ottoman dignitary dressed. And then it says here, it took out after the sermon, by the way, it took out 2 rolls, meaning 2 Torahs. They read from the 10 Commandments. And then it says, interesting, Mr. Rivera's little son of 8 read from the first chapter of Ezekiel, meaning the Haftorah. The synagogue was decorated with flowers. So here we have a random diary of a minister in Newport telling us interesting minhagim of the shul in, and again, I like to point out as a sort of works for Touro College, the Chazan at the time was Isaac Touro. He wasn't a rabbi, he was the Chazan. His son was Judah Touro, the eventually famous philanthropist, who in his death in the 1850s left over lots of money to many, many causes, Jews and non-Jewish causes alike, hospitals and synagogues and Mishkanot Sha'ananim. And one of them was to rename the synagogue, Yeshuat Yisrael, the Touro synagogue, for his dedication and his refurbishing. But this drasha, as it says here, not only did Ezra Stiles came, but even governor came and the judge and another judge came. So this was a very, very big deal that everyone came to. So let's repeat our question. We know who this person was, Rabbi Cargill. We know a lot about him. We know who recorded it. Eventually, who wrote it down, Ezra Stiles. We know why he came, Mr. Lopez. We know when it was, where it was, but we don't know why did he say what he said. Why was it such a big deal? So I want to take a look here together with you at the actual book. Now, I have the book here. This is a photo offset edition from the Torah Library. So on the last page, the way it worked in those days, at the end of your sermon, you said a prayer, but not like a prayer that you made up. So here it's on the screen. It's easier to see on the screen. I just want to point out to remind everyone that colonial script, the letter S for like Sam in middle of a word, except for the end of the word, looked like an F but not dotted. So this word here, if you can see, is not mofed, it's most. That's how, it's not Congress, it's Congress if you look at the Bill of Rights. So that big letter is an S. O most clement creator and preserver of the universe, may thine incomprehensible power inspire within us a desire of following thy right ways. Do thou, O Lord, enlighten the eyes of our understanding to comprehend some part of the mysteries contained in thy divine law. Entirely dissolve the thick clouds of our ignorance and ingratitude, and permit that we may rightly come to the true knowledge of a so precious a treasure ever conforming our minds to thy divine will. Wilt thou, O most powerful God, grant us sufficient capacity to penetrate the great number of precepts, which by the command we are under the obligation of observing, the whole being directed from the benignity for our full enjoyment, both of temporal and spiritual felicities. And I think this sums up the problem very well. If you are Aaron Lopez, if you are any one of the hundreds and hundreds of former Marranos who sacrificed everything, who, really beyond our comprehension, dedication to Judaism, to throw off the pretense, return the sacrifice, the mortal sacrifice. There were some Jews who went, to Amsterdam and then went to Brazil, and they got caught again in the Inquisition, and they had to, and they got killed. There were Jews who went to South Carolina, And then they had to flee in the War of Jenkins' Ear because they were afraid the Spanish from Florida would come up to South Carolina, and they would start the Inquisition there. So Spanish Jews were really, really afraid of the Inquisition, and someone who came out and declared his Judaism out loud was an unbelievable sacrifice. But the problem is, what did they know? How did they know anything? They had the Bible, obviously, because if they were a Christian, they had a Bible with all the other stuff in it as well. But they could read the Torah, but they still wouldn't know what to do. And that is the dilemma that these rabbis, these shluchot rabbanim, this Rabbi Carrigal had to deal with. How am I going to educate? How am I going to tell these totally dedicated but ignorant Jews of what to do? And here we come into the dilemma, what we call, maybe call Torah Sheba'al Peh, call it Masorah, call it even Minhag, whatever word you want. And that is, how do you go about keeping the Torah if you really don't know what to do? But not because you're ignorant, because you never bothered, but because you were devoid of tradition for 200 years. And then here's the problem. And this has actually happened. There were some ex-Moranos who came and said, wait a second. I don't really like this. I thought Judaism was all about Torah Shebechtav. I thought it was all about like love thy neighbor or something beautiful like that. And all of a sudden I come here and a rabbi teaches me all these laws and halachos, and I don't get it. And there's a very famous person, a doctor. His name is, make this a little smaller, you can see his name. It was Isaac Orobio de Castro. He lived about in the 1600s. And he was exactly the same sort of story. Morano, Portugal. None of that. He was arrested by the Inquisition, tortured, dungeoned 3 years, didn't give in, didn't give up. Went to Toulouse, eventually went to Amsterdam and said, you know what, I'm a Jew, I'm no more pretense. And, unbelievable. Then he had a problem. He needed a rabbi. But then he had a question. What does this mean? What does that mean? Does that make sense? And then he had to deal with many of his contemporaries, Juan Prado and others, and eventually like the Spinoza types, which were like, we wanted Judaism, but we didn't know really what Judaism is. Maybe we don't like it so much. So this is what all of the Moranos and all the rabbis who were sent to the Moranos had to deal with. Now, Isaac Orobio de Castro did an unbelievable job of asking rabbis, figuring it out, getting to know it, and eventually defending it, which is why he's such an important person, Isaac Orobio de Castro. So this is what the job that in my opinion, Rabbi Carrigal took upon himself to teach Aaron Lopez and the Jews of Newport, Rhode Island. He wanted them to have a connection to the Torah. And I think it's not just randomly that he gave this speech, this drasha on Shavuos. He could have given it on Pesach, right? He was there he was there since Purim, as I pointed out. Shavuos is the time when we accept the Torah. Shavuos is the time when we all say Nasa v'Nishma. Now, our Nasa v'Nishma isn't about, we don't know anything. We all have a great Jewish education. We have great rabbis. The shul has, wonderful rabbis. Now that you have wonderful speakers, and Rabbi Miller told me there'll be speakers throughout the week and throughout Shavuos. Everyone's educated. So our Nasa v'Nishma isn't that I'm going to find out something I might not have known, but I'm going to accept upon that which I might not have thought is the Judaism I envisioned. Just like the Morano who had the 5 books of Moses in front of him, but had no idea what Shabbos was, no idea what Tefillin was. And all of a sudden, someone explained it to him, no idea what a lot of things were. And he said, you know what? I'm going to accept it. Now we're going to read Rabbi Carrigal's speech, and you'll say, oh, that's exactly what he was trying to say. Now, again, many historians have different opinions, and that's what historians do, not just tell you the facts, they tell you the interpretation. So there are those who want to read his speech about whether or not the colonies are going to break off. Some want to read it about maybe it's speaking against Christianity, maybe not. There are different opinions. In my opinion, based on the historical context, what I just told you, I think this is really what is going on. So here, this is the last page, and I'm going to go back a little bit. Let me just make it a little bit easier to see. Okay, that makes it harder to see. No, I don't know what I'm doing here. Okay, let's not do that. I'll try my best here. what I did. Okay. Sorry, but give me one more second. Here we go. So we'll randomly pick a place. Here are a few sources. We'll just look at it together again quickly. Just we are limited in time. There have been, again, it starts here at the beginning. I'll just look at it together. It's only about 15 pages. Again, here he starts off with Tehillim, Gemara. Here he gives praise to Mr. Aaron Lopez, the Parnas. So obviously he mentions him in his speech because obviously that's where he's there to raise funds for Mr. Lopez. And over here, I would go here we are in the middle. And it's so interesting. He predicts the reform/conservative historical school of Judaism. He says there are critics. I'm skipping ahead. They say that the supreme being, having endowed those of a clear understanding with sufficient capacity to penetrate and comprehend his precepts, we must conform to them with all exactness, so long as we see that the primitive reasons exist. There having been such great alterations of age, climate, situations, and other circumstances, it is to be supposed that the original reasons of some precepts may have ceased. And this is exactly what the school of Zechariah Frankl, the conservative movement, and really the reform movement as well, came to say about 80 years later, which was, the Torah is great, but maybe it was given not to us, it was given to the primitive people. And this was a very popular opinion. And again, this was when you have to deal with a new tradition, which is an old tradition, but you've come for the first time, like, what is that all about? And this is really, if you go page after page, and I've obviously highlighted different, right? There have been some authors who have touched with a vehement desire of finding out new methods of commenting upon the sacred scriptures. Instead of illustrating them, have involved them in obscurity by exploitations full of imaginary conceptions, remote applications. And page after page, he goes on to this. The divine precepts that only enlighten the eyes of the understanding when the explanation thereof is pure and clear, which is not to be expected unless it proceeds from the fountain of tradition. Over and over again, here we have it again, there have been professors who, instead of teaching their auditories and disciples the essential points of religion and morality, have employed their time in doctrines and discourses and subjects that are entirely out of our reach and beyond human comprehension. So over and over again, throughout his speech, he makes this point, and I'm just skipping ahead again. It's over. Here it is, right? And let us, now he gives Musar at the end, right? So what does he say? And let us fix and set a certain part apart at a time in the day for the meditation, meaning learning of the holy law, with a firm resolution of interpreting it in its natural purity and according to its true principles. Now he doesn't say it straight out what the other people said, but it's very, very clear that the point of this few-page sermon is to get the Jews of Newport, the ex-Moranos, the very dedicated but unlearned and who don't know about the traditions, don't know about all the different things about Judaism, to get them to learn Torah, right? Every rabbi and every Shavua says the same thing. You got to learn Torah. We were given the Torah, but you got to learn Torah the right way. And that is, I guess every rabbi says to every one of his, and every rabbi and every shul and every congregation, learn Torah the right way. But what's the right way? So that's always the question. But what he wanted was, I know it's difficult he's telling you. I know that you struggle with that, the Judaism that you never knew of is being taught to you. And you had a totally different images, and you've been doing Judaism for 200 years. But now you got to do it the right way, the pure way. And it's unbelievably difficult. And I think that's the message of Shavuos to us as well throughout the generations. We're very knowledgeable in the year 2021. But we all understand that there are parts of Judaism, halacha, that we might say, I don't understand, I don't get it, maybe it's wrong, maybe it's not, doesn't apply to me. If we're being honest. Nasa v'nishma, Shavuos, the accepting of the Torah, is in every generation. It's not that one time, we didn't know what was going to be said, Nasa v'nishma. No, Nasa v'nishma, Shavuos, this drasha, whether by luck, whether by on purpose, whether by divine guidance, being that first printed drasha in America, but also was the first printed one so that everyone in the Americas, who were dealing with this problem, there were no rabbis in America whatsoever at this time. The best they would have is there was in New York, there were two people, a little learned, but no great sheikhs, not like today. So they dealt with how do you learn about, how do you take upon yourself Judaism that you don't understand and that were never taught. And we today, I think that's the story of Nasa v'nishma. Allow me to, let's look at one Gemara together. You all know this Gemara. This is the Gemara that tells in the story of Nasa v'nishma. The Gemara tells a funny story. The Gemara tells a story that there was a heretic, who saw Rava. So we're talking about the year 200s, 300s, was immersed in studying halacha. And he was sitting and his fingers were beneath his legs and he was squeezing them. And his fingers were splurting blood. And he said to them, Amma Peziza, right? The famous like insult, impulsive nation. Dekadmisu pumaychu le'udnaichu. You let your mouth precede your ears. You quickly said, Nasa v'nishma. You should have thought, what God, do I understand it? Do I know it? Can it make sense to me? But you Jews just went ahead and said, Nasa v'nishma. And you should have, and again, why the story of him sitting on his hands with the blood? Because that's the point. It doesn't seem logical. You guys are always illogical. You're just accepting what God says. Maybe you don't understand it. You do it because it's, Nasa v'nishma, it makes no sense. And Rava answered back, Tumas Yisharem Tanchem. The integrity of the upright will guide them. The definition of Kabbalah Satorah, the definition of accepting the Torah, the statement of Nasa v'nishma, our coming to shul, inside, outside, whatever minyan you're at, wherever you are, when you listen to Kabbalah, when you listen to the Aseret Adibros, Kabbalah Satorah is not about just that one-time event. It's about that every one of us in our lives, whether we're living in Newport in 1773 or living in Lawrence in 2021, is that there's going to be parts of the Torah that you might not understand right away. There are parts of the Torah that you never even envisioned. But we're going to learn Torah, right? We're going to learn Torah, as it says here. We're going to set a certain part of our certain time of the day for the meditation of the Holy Law, with a firm resolution of interpreting it in its natural purity and according to its true principles. And that's exactly what this prayer we started off with wants from us. Will thou, O most powerful, grant us sufficient capacity to penetrate the great number of precepts? And that's our approach to Torah. Our approach to Torah is understanding it in a way that it makes sense to us, but knowing that Hashem gave us this Torah, every aspect of it, all 630 mitzvot, all of the Gemara, all of the halacha. And we are meant to study it and take it upon ourselves and inculcate it in our lives, even though some things we might not understand, even though sometimes it might seem to go against our lives and the way we live our lives. And that's exactly what Kabbalah Torah is all about. It's about the tradition. It's about taking that upon ourselves. That's what Rabbi Cargill's message was to Aaron Lopez. That's what the Gemara's message was, the Rava's message to that heretic. And that is what I think my message today is, that this sermon, fortuitously, by divine inspiration, was the one printed in America, because I think that's the Jews of America. We are the luckiest, it's hard thing to say, we are the most fortunate Jews, maybe since the times of the Beis HaMikdash. Very little persecution, no one's trying to kill us. We're a free country, freedom to practice our religion, freedom to be successful. And it is that America, which 1773 was almost founded, Rabbi Cargill understood that was going to be the challenge, that you're going to have an unbelievable life as a citizen of this country, and you have this Torah, and you've got to make it part of your life, and every part of it, not the parts you pick and choose, not the parts that you don't understand, every part of it. And that's much easier for us now that we know, because we're not Moranos, But I think that's still the message of Shavuos. I think that's why the drasha of 1773 in Newport, in Yeshuat Yisrael, rings true today for all of us as well. I want to wish you a wonderful, wonderful Chag Sameach.